They laughed when Sarah Mitchell signed up for the elite sniper training course, dismissing her as just another weekend warrior trying to play soldier. What they didn't know was that the quiet librarian from Cedar Falls had once held the record for the longest confirmed kill shot in military history, and she was about to remind everyone that some secrets are worth keeping until the perfect moment to reveal them. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning fog hung low over the Blackwater training facility. As Sarah pulled her weathered Honda Civic into the gravel parking lot, surrounded by lifted trucks, tactical vehicles, and motorcycles that screamed military experience. At 38, she moved with an unassuming grace that made her nearly invisible among the crowd of eager participants gathering near the main building. Her shoulder-length auburn hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore faded jeans, hiking boots, and a plain green jacket that looked like it came from a discount outdoor store. The other trainees were exactly what she'd expected. Mostly men in their 20s and 30s, sporting expensive tactical gear, military-style haircuts, and the kind of confident swagger that came from years of telling war stories in bars. They carried custom rifle cases worth more than Sarah's monthly salary at the Cedar Falls Public Library, where she spent her days helping children find picture books and elderly patrons navigate the computer catalog Sarah's own equipment told. A carefully crafted story of modest means and limited experience. Her rifle case was a basic black polymer model that could be found at any sporting goods store, containing a standard hunting rifle that appeared unremarkable in every way. No custom modifications, no high-end optics, nothing that would suggest anything beyond casual recreational shooting. Her shooting mat was a simple foam pad, her range bag was worn canvas, and her clothing showed no military insignia or tactical brands that might trigger uncomfortable questions about her background. The transformation from decorated Army Ranger sniper to small-town librarian had been as deliberate as any military operation Sarah had ever planned. Her apartment above the old bookstore on Main Street contained no photographs from her 8 years of service, no display cases filled with medals and commendations, no maps marking the locations where she had changed the course of conflicts that the public would never hear about. Instead, the space was filled with the comfortable clutter of civilian life, romance novels, houseplants, cooking magazines, and a collection of ceramic owls that her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had been giving her for 3 years. Sarah's daily routine had become a masterpiece of ordinary predictability. Morning coffee at Rosie's Diner, where she read the local newspaper and listened to conversations about school board elections and the weather. Afternoon walks through residential neighborhoods where she observed the peaceful rhythms of family life that had always seemed foreign during her military years. Evening shifts at the library where her steady demeanor and patient personality made her invaluable for helping patrons with research projects and computer problems. The decision to attend the Blackwater sniper course had been motivated by a restlessness that Sarah couldn't quite identify. 3 years of civilian life had brought healing and peace, but also a growing sense that something essential was missing. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, the psychiatrist who had helped her transition from military service, had suggested that controlled exposure to her former profession might help her integrate those suppressed aspects of her identity in a healthier way. Sarah's registration for the Advanced Sniper Training course had required her to provide documentation of previous firearms experience, forcing her to submit carefully edited military records that revealed almost nothing about her actual service history. The paperwork listed her as a former Army soldier with basic marksmanship qualifications, a description so generic that it could apply to thousands of veterans who had served in support roles. What the forms didn't reveal was that Sarah Mitchell had been selected for the Army's most elite sniper program at age 22, after demonstrating shooting abilities that shattered every existing training record her real training had taken place at facilities that didn't appear on any public maps, under instructors whose identities were classified at levels requiring congressional authorization to access. She had learned to engage targets at distances that challenged the laws of physics in environmental conditions that would have been considered impossible by conventional military doctrine. Sarah's actual service record contained achievements that would never be acknowledged publicly, confirmed eliminations that had prevented terrorist attacks, precision shots that had rescued hostages from situations deemed hopeless and strategic, eliminations that had altered the balance of power in regions where American involvement was officially denied. Her longest confirmed kill had been achieved at a distance of 3,247 meters, a shot that had required her to account for wind patterns, atmospheric pressure, temperature variations, and the curvature of the Earth itself. The target had been a high-value terrorist leader whose elimination had prevented a coordinated attack on American forces, but the shot had never been officially recorded because acknowledging it would have revealed capabilities that the military preferred to keep secret. The psychological evaluations conducted during Sarah's service had described her as possessing an almost supernatural connection to her weapon, an intuitive understanding of ballistics and environmental factors that couldn't be replicated through training alone. Medical examinations had revealed visual acuity that existed at the extreme edge of human capability, combined with hand-eye coordination and spatial reasoning that placed her in less than 1 percentile of the population. But Sarah's military career had ended not in glory, but in the kind of traumatic incident that forced even the most capable warriors to question everything they had been trained to believe. The mission that changed everything had taken place in a remote Syrian village where intelligence reports indicated the presence of a terrorist cell planning chemical weapons attacks against civilian populations. Sarah had been positioned on a mountainside overlooking the compound. Her rifle, trained on what intelligence had confirmed was the cell's leader, preparing to activate a dispersal device. The shot that ended Sarah's military career had been technically perfect, executed with the precision that had made her legendary among special operations forces. But the figure that collapsed in her crosshairs had not been the terrorist leader her orders had specified. Instead, her bullet had killed Dr. Amira Hassan, a humanitarian aid worker who had been trying to provide medical assistance to villagers affected by previous chemical attacks. The intelligence failure that had resulted in Dr. Hassan's death had been the result of false information provided by local sources, seeking to eliminate someone who had been documenting war crimes. The investigation that followed had cleared Sarah of any wrongdoing, determining that she had acted in accordance with her orders and the intelligence available at the time. The target identification had been confirmed through multiple sources, and the engagement had been authorized by commanders who had reviewed all available information. But technical vindication provided no comfort to a sniper whose entire identity had been built on perfect accuracy and absolute certainty about her targets. Sarah's decision to leave military service had been immediate and irreversible. The Army had attempted to retain her through offers of promotion, specialized assignments, and comprehensive psychological counseling that might have restored her confidence and effectiveness. But Sarah's relationship with precision shooting had been fundamentally altered by the knowledge that even perfect execution could result in unacceptable consequences when the human cost of error was measured in innocent lives. Her transition to civilian life had been negotiated through complex arrangements involving the Department of Veterans Affairs, military intelligence agencies, and medical professionals who understood the unique challenges faced by personnel whose service had involved highly classified operations. Sarah's expertise and knowledge made her a potential security risk, but her psychological profile indicated that she could be trusted to maintain the silence that her former missions required. Her settlement in Cedar Falls had been carefully chosen to provide the anonymity and peaceful environment that military psychologists believed essential for her recovery. The small town's distance from military installations and defense contractors meant that Sarah was unlikely to encounter situations that might trigger memories or require her to explain her background. The community's respect for privacy and veteran status provided additional protection from the kind of scrutiny that might have been problematic in larger cities. Sarah's work at the public library had proven therapeutic in ways that military counselors hadn't anticipated. The precise organizational skills required for cataloging and research were similar enough to her former analytical work to maintain her mental sharpness, while the focus on education and community service provided psychological benefits that had gradually reduced the nightmares and anxiety attacks that had characterized her early civilian years. The trust and gratitude of library patrons had proven easier to accept than military recognition or praise. As Sarah stood in the Blackwater parking lot, watching the other participants display their expensive equipment and discuss their training goals, she could feel the familiar weight of attention that came with being around serious shooters and military personnel. Her body remembered the rhythms of range safety protocols and equipment preparation, muscle memory that had been dormant but never truly forgotten. The sounds of distant gunfire and range commands triggered responses that she had spent 3 years trying to suppress, bringing back memories of missions and achievements that were supposed to remain buried in classified files. The registration process required all participants to gather in the facility's main briefing room, where course instructors would explain the training curriculum and safety requirements. Sarah positioned herself in the back row, hoping to observe without drawing attention, but she could already sense the dynamics that would define the next 5 days. The other trainees were evaluating each other with the competitive intensity of people whose self-image depended on establishing dominance in environments that validated their masculine identity and tactical knowledge. Sarah's deliberately understated appearance and modest equipment had already marked her as someone who didn't belong in the elite training environment, making her an obvious target for the kind of casual dismissal that serious shooters directed toward weekend hobbyists and military wannabes. But that perception was exactly what Sarah had intended to create, providing her with the psychological camouflage that would allow her to participate in advanced training without revealing capabilities that were meant to remain hidden forever. Chief Instructor Marcus Bulldog Thompson commanded the Blackwater training facility with the iron-fisted authority of someone who had built his reputation on breaking down civilian egos and rebuilding them according to his vision of tactical excellence. At 51, his imposing 6'3" frame still carried the aggressive posture and intimidating presence that had characterized his 28-year Marine Corps career, though careful examination would reveal that his service record contained more stateside training assignments than actual combat deployments. Thompson's corner office in the facility's main building was a shrine to military achievement and personal dominance. The walls were covered with certificates, awards, and photographs documenting every significant moment of his career, creating an overwhelming display of credentials that demanded immediate recognition from anyone who entered. His mahogany desk, positioned like a command center overlooking the briefing area, was arranged with geometric precision that suggested someone who needed external order to compensate for internal doubts about his actual combat experience. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The daily routine that Thompson maintained began at precisely 0500 hours with a review of weather conditions, range assignments, and detailed background checks on every participant scheduled for training. He prided himself on what he called tactical dominance, the ability to establish psychological control through superior knowledge, physical presence, and unwavering confidence in his own expertise. His morning briefings to subordinate instructors were legendary for their intensity and attention to detail, with junior staff often standing at attention for hours while he dissected training methodologies with obsessive precision. Thompson's philosophy of instruction was built on the fundamental belief that civilian shooting enthusiasts were soft targets who needed to be systematically broken down before they could be rebuilt according to proper military standards. In his worldview, effective marksmanship could only be achieved through psychological pressure, harsh criticism, and the gradual earning of respect through demonstrated competence under increasingly demanding conditions. He viewed his role not merely as an instructor, but as a gatekeeper who separated genuine warriors from recreational shooters who lacked the mental toughness required for precision shooting under stress. The chief instructor's background was more complex than his aggressive exterior suggested. Thompson's Marine Corps service had been distinguished but limited in actual combat experience. Most of his deployments had been to rear echelon positions where his responsibilities involved training other Marines rather than engaging enemy forces directly. His few overseas assignments had been to established bases where the primary threats came from indirect fire rather than direct engagement with hostile forces. But decades of careful narrative construction had created a mythology around his service that impressed civilian audiences who lacked the military knowledge to distinguish between genuine combat experience and training expertise. Thompson's approach to female participants was particularly problematic, reflecting attitudes shaped by his service during an era when women's roles in combat operations were severely restricted. He maintained that biological and psychological differences made women inherently unsuitable for activities requiring the physical strength, mental resilience, and technical precision demanded by advanced marksmanship training. His comments were carefully crafted to avoid direct violations of equal opportunity policies, but his body language and evaluation criteria consistently communicated skepticism about female participants' ability to succeed in what he considered fundamentally masculine domains. The instructional staff at Blackwater had learned to navigate Thompson's complex personality through careful observation and unspoken understanding of the behaviors that would earn approval or trigger explosive reactions. They understood that Thompson valued displays of traditional military bearing, that he responded favorably to requests that emphasized his superior knowledge and experience, and that questioning his methods or offering alternative perspectives was considered insubordination. The culture he had created was one of absolute hierarchy, where independent thinking was viewed as a threat to the disciplined environment necessary for effective training. Lieutenant Colonel, retired, Patricia "Pat" Rodriguez served as Thompson's second-in-command and primary range safety officer, a position she had earned through genuine combat experience and technical expertise that exceeded Thompson's own background. Rodriguez was a competent leader who had commanded artillery units in Iraq and Afghanistan, earning her position through demonstrated ability rather than political maneuvering. But her survival in Thompson's command structure required carefully managing his ego while quietly ensuring that actual training objectives were accomplished without compromising student safety or educational value. Rodriguez had witnessed countless incidents where Thompson's need to establish dominance had resulted in unnecessary humiliation of students who were genuinely trying to learn advanced shooting techniques. She had seen him reduce experienced hunters to emotional breakdowns through verbal abuse disguised as constructive criticism, and watched him systematically destroy the confidence of female participants who had shown promising natural abilities. Her attempts to moderate his approach had been met with lectures about military discipline and the importance of maintaining standards that separated serious shooters from recreational hobbyists. The physical layout of Blackwater's training facility reflected Thompson's belief in the importance of psychological intimidation and visual dominance. The main building's lobby featured an imposing display of military equipment, historical photographs, and motivational posters designed to overwhelm visitors with the seriousness and intensity of the training they were about to receive. Thompson's office was positioned to overlook the main reception area, allowing him to observe and evaluate every person who entered his domain before they had any opportunity to prepare for his assessment. The outdoor ranges had been designed according to Thompson's specifications to create maximum psychological pressure on trainees. The firing positions were deliberately uncomfortable, forcing shooters to maintain challenging stances that increased difficulty while providing opportunities for Thompson to criticize their form and technique. The target systems were configured to emphasize failure rather than progress, with scoring methods that made even reasonable performance appear inadequate when measured against Thompson's arbitrary standards of excellence. Thompson's daily inspection routine took him through every area of the facility, where he would identify minor infractions and use them as opportunities to demonstrate his authority and attention to detail. Equipment that wasn't arranged to his exact specifications would trigger lectures about military precision and professional standards. Staff members who failed to acknowledge his presence with appropriate deference would find themselves subjected to public corrections that served as examples for other personnel and visiting students. The chief instructor's relationship with the surrounding community was carefully cultivated to reinforce his image as a tactical expert and military authority. He regularly spoke at local veterans organizations and civic groups about leadership and military service, using these opportunities to embellish his own accomplishments while positioning himself as an expert on all matters related to combat operations and firearms training. His presentations were filled with dramatic stories and technical details that impressed audiences who lacked the background to recognize inaccuracies or identify exaggerations. Thompson's marriage to Linda Thompson had endured for 23 years through her acceptance of his need to be the dominant authority in every aspect of their relationship. Linda had learned to navigate his explosive temper and narcissistic demands by maintaining a supportive facade while privately managing most practical aspects of their life together. She understood that questioning his decisions or challenging his authority would result in emotional manipulation, disguised as military-style discipline and leadership training. The couple's social circle consisted primarily of other military retirees and community members who reinforced Thompson's self-image through their respect for his supposed expertise and combat experience. These relationships were built on Thompson's ability to project confidence and authority, while avoiding situations where his actual knowledge might be tested by people with genuine special operations experience or advanced technical training. Thompson's financial situation was more precarious than his lifestyle suggested. His military pension was supplemented by income from the training facility that depended on maintaining a steady stream of civilian participants willing to pay premium prices for what was marketed as elite-level instruction. The success of his programs relied heavily on his reputation as a demanding but effective instructor, which motivated him to create memorable training experiences that participants would recommend to others seeking advanced tactical education. His business model was built on psychological intimidation followed by gradual acceptance, creating student loyalty through shared suffering rather than genuine educational value. Students who successfully completed Thompson's programs often became advocates for his methods, believing that the harsh treatment they had endured was necessary for developing the mental toughness required for advanced marksmanship. This cycle of abuse and validation had created a community of supporters who defended Thompson's approach even when it crossed ethical boundaries. Thompson's political views were shaped by nostalgia for military hierarchies and traditional gender roles that he believed were being undermined by social changes he couldn't understand or accept. He viewed contemporary discussions about equality and inclusion as threats to the natural order that had given him his sense of identity and purpose. His resistance to change was motivated not by principled beliefs about military effectiveness, but by fear that evolving standards might expose the limitations of his own background and qualifications. The chief instructor's preparation for each Training session involved reviewing participant files and identifying individuals who might challenge his authority or demonstrate capabilities that could undermine his position as the facility's acknowledged expert. He paid particular attention to participants with military backgrounds, especially those whose service records suggested combat experience that might exceed his own. His strategy for dealing with such individuals involved immediate confrontation, designed to establish dominance before they could gain credibility with other students. Thompson's psychological techniques were based on military training methods that had been developed for breaking down recruits and rebuilding them according to institutional standards. But his application of these methods to civilian volunteers represented a fundamental misunderstanding of appropriate educational environments and learning objectives. His approach was designed to satisfy his own emotional needs rather than to provide effective instruction in advanced marksmanship techniques. The chief instructor's office contained an extensive library of books about military leadership and tactical training, though careful examination would reveal that most had never been read beyond their introductory chapters. His understanding of effective instruction was based on his own experiences as a trainee, rather than any systematic study of adult learning principles or educational methodology. He had never questioned whether the methods that had been used on him were actually effective or simply traditional practices that persisted through institutional inertia. Thompson's morning briefing on this particular Monday included a review of the week's training roster that had identified several participants who warranted special attention. Sarah Mitchell's file indicated minimal military experience and no prior advanced training, placing her in the category of complete beginners who would require basic instruction in fundamental shooting principles. Thompson's initial assessment classified her as someone who would likely struggle with the physical and mental demands of precision marksmanship, making her an ideal candidate for the kind of early elimination that would demonstrate the program's high standards to other participants. The staff meeting that Thompson conducted before the training session began emphasize the importance of maintaining rigorous standards while providing appropriate challenges for students at different skill levels. His instructions to Rodriguez and the other range officers reflected his belief that effective training required constant pressure and frequent correction, with success measured by participants' ability to meet increasingly demanding standards, rather than their improvement from baseline performance levels. Thompson's anticipation of the week's training was influenced by his confidence that his 28 years of military experience had prepared him to handle any situation that might arise. He had trained thousands of students over the course of his career, and his methods had proven effective in maintaining discipline while establishing his authority as the program's acknowledged expert. The possibility that someone might possess capabilities that exceeded his own expertise was not something that occurred to him as he prepared to demonstrate once again why Blackwater's training program was considered the most demanding and effective in the region. As Chief Instructor Thompson emerged from his office to begin another week of establishing his dominance over civilian trainees, he carried himself with the aggressive confidence of someone who had never encountered opposition he couldn't overcome through force of personality and systematic intimidation. His worldview was built on the assumption that his military background and institutional authority would be sufficient to maintain control over any situation that might develop during the training program. But his arrogance prevented him from recognizing the signs that might have warned him about the true nature of the challenge he was about to face in the quiet woman who had registered under the unremarkable name of Sarah Mitchell. The collision between Sarah Mitchell and Chief Instructor Thompson occurred at precisely 0800 hours in Blackwater's main briefing room, where 24 eager participants had assembled for the mandatory orientation session. Sarah had deliberately chosen a seat in the back corner, hoping to blend into the crowd of enthusiastic trainees. But Thompson's predatory gaze swept across the assembled group with the methodical precision of someone evaluating potential targets for systematic intimidation. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Blackwater's Advanced Precision Marksmanship Program. Thompson's voice boomed across the room with theatrical authority that demanded immediate attention. I am Chief Instructor Thompson, and for the next 5 days, your shooting abilities, mental toughness, and fundamental character will be tested according to standards that 90% of you cannot imagine meeting. Sarah observed Thompson's presentation with the analytical detachment that had once allowed her to evaluate enemy commanders across hostile territory. His posture projected aggressive dominance, but subtle indicators suggested someone compensating for internal insecurities rather than operating from genuine authority. The way he positioned himself to tower over seated participants, the calculated volume that demanded attention rather than commanding respect, and the careful avoidance of eye contact with individuals who might possess actual military experience, all revealed a man whose confidence was built on intimidation rather than competence. Thompson's opening monologue continued with predictable emphasis on discipline, standards, and the brutal realities of precision shooting under combat conditions. This is not a recreational shooting course for weekend warriors. This is not a hobby program for people who want to feel tactical without earning the right. This is serious business that requires serious commitment from serious individuals who understand that good intentions cannot substitute for mental toughness and technical excellence. During his speech about mental fortitude and technical requirements, Thompson's attention began to focus on Sarah with the calculated interest of a predator selecting its primary target. Her position in the back row, her unremarkable appearance, and her classification as a beginner made her an ideal candidate for the kind of public humiliation that Thompson used to establish dominance over his training groups. Sarah recognized the selection process and understood that responding to his provocations would only escalate the situation in ways that could compromise her carefully maintained cover. "You, in the back corner," Thompson pointed directly at Sarah, his voice carrying across the room with deliberate volume designed to maximize attention. "Stand up and introduce yourself to the group. Tell us what brings you to advanced precision marksmanship training." Sarah rose slowly, maintaining the calm composure that had once allowed her to function under enemy observation without revealing her position or intentions. "Sarah Mitchell, sir. I'm here to improve my shooting skills for hunting and personal protection." Thompson's smile was predatory and calculated. "Hunting and personal protection. How refreshing. And what's your previous experience with precision shooting, Miss Mitchell?" "Limited, sir. Some target practice at local ranges. I've never had formal training." The response was technically accurate while revealing nothing about her actual background. Sarah had learned during her transition to civilian life that the truth was often less believable than carefully constructed understatement. "Target practice at local ranges," Thompson repeated with theatrical condescension. "Well, Miss Mitchell, I hope you understand that military-grade precision marksmanship is considerably more demanding than plinking at paper targets in a controlled environment. We'll see if you can adapt to real training standards." The other participants shifted uncomfortably in their seats, recognizing the unfair targeting, but lacking the confidence to challenge someone who radiated institutional authority. Several of the male trainees exchanged glances that suggested they were grateful not to be the focus of Thompson's attention, while a few seemed to enjoy the spectacle of watching someone else being systematically diminished. Sarah remained standing until Thompson dismissed her with a curt gesture, her expression unchanged despite the obvious attempt to humiliate her before training had even begun. She had witnessed similar tactics during her military career and understood that Thompson's approach was designed to establish a hierarchy where his authority was unquestioned, and his expertise was acknowledged as superior to any participant's background or capabilities. The briefing continued with Thompson's detailed explanation of the training program structure, safety requirements, and performance standards. His presentation emphasized the elimination-based nature of the course. where participants who failed to meet minimum requirements would be dismissed before completing the full program. The threat of public failure was clearly intended to create psychological pressure that would make students more compliant and appreciative of Thompson's instruction. By the end of this week, half of you will have discovered that precision marksmanship requires capabilities that you simply don't possess, Thompson announced with satisfaction. The other half will have learned to respect the technical demands and mental discipline that separate recreational shooters from individuals who can perform under genuine pressure. Following the briefing, participants were directed to the equipment storage area where they would prepare their gear for the first day's training exercises. Sarah unpacked her modest equipment with deliberate care, aware that every action was being observed and evaluated by both instructors and fellow participants. Her unremarkable rifle and basic accessories immediately marked her as someone operating on a limited budget with minimal experience in high-end shooting sports. Mike Stevens, a former Army mechanic from Detroit, approached Sarah's preparation area with the friendly confidence of someone whose own military service had taught him to recognize fellow veterans. "That's a solid hunting rifle," he commented, examining Sarah's weapon with professional interest. "Not fancy but reliable. Sometimes the simple stuff works better than all the high-tech gear." "Thank you," Sarah replied neutrally, neither encouraging nor discouraging further conversation. Stephen seemed genuine in his attempt at camaraderie. But Sarah had learned that even innocent interactions could reveal information that might compromise her carefully constructed background story. Jessica Warren, a police detective from Phoenix who had enrolled in the course to improve her tactical shooting skills, observed Sarah's equipment selection with curiosity. "First time doing advanced training?" she asked with the direct manner of someone accustomed to evaluating people quickly and accurately. "Yes, I'm hoping to learn enough to feel more confident with my shooting," Sarah responded with the careful honesty that she had perfected during 3 years of civilian life. The statement was true in its own way, though it revealed nothing about the specific nature of her confidence issues or previous experience. Thompson's approach to the equipment inspection phase revealed his systematic method for establishing psychological dominance over individual participants. He moved through the preparation area with theatrical authority, examining each person's gear while providing commentary that was ostensibly educational, but actually designed to reinforce his superior knowledge and their amateur status. When Thompson reached Sarah's station, his inspection became particularly thorough and critical. He examined her rifle with exaggerated attention to detail, handling the weapon as if searching for fundamental flaws that would justify his preconceptions about her capabilities and preparedness. "Miss Mitchell, this is a very basic hunting rifle with factory standard components," Thompson announced loudly enough for other participants to hear. "I hope you understand that precision marksmanship requires equipment that's been properly configured for accuracy rather than general purpose hunting applications." Sarah nodded respectfully without responding verbally, understanding that any attempt to defend her equipment choices would provide Thompson with additional opportunities for public criticism. Her rifle was indeed basic by the standards of the other participants, but it was also perfectly adequate for the training exercises they would be conducting during the first few days of the program. "The scope you've mounted is adequate for recreational shooting, but it lacks the technical specifications required for true precision work," Thompson continued his critique. "We'll see if your fundamental skills are sufficient to compensate for the limitations of your equipment." The systematic humiliation continued through Thompson's examination of Sarah's other gear, where he identified every item that failed to meet his standards for professional-grade equipment. Her shooting mat was too thin, her range bag lacked proper organization, and her clothing showed no evidence of understanding tactical requirements for extended shooting sessions. Each criticism was delivered with the patient condescension of someone explaining obvious deficiencies to a student who should have known better. "Lieutenant, Colonel Rodriguez observed Thompson's treatment of Sarah with growing concern about the increasingly personal nature of his critique and the obvious bias that was affecting his professional judgment. Her own military experience had taught her to recognize the difference between constructive criticism, designed to improve performance, and systematic harassment, designed to establish dominance through humiliation. "Chief, perhaps we should focus on getting everyone through the safety briefing before we start detailed equipment evaluations," Rodriguez suggested with diplomatic neutrality. "We have a full schedule today, and the students need to understand range protocols before we begin live fire exercises." Thompson's response revealed the extent to which his ego had become invested in establishing absolute authority over the training environment. His dismissal of Rodriguez's suggestion was immediate and defensive, delivered with the aggressive confidence of someone whose position felt threatened by any questioning of his methods or priorities. "Colonel, these civilians need to understand from the beginning that this program operates according to military standards rather than civilian accommodations," Thompson replied with barely concealed irritation. "If their equipment doesn't meet minimum requirements, they need to know that before we waste time on advanced instruction that requires proper tools." Sarah recognized the dangerous dynamic that was developing between Thompson's need to establish dominance and his growing focus on her as the ideal target for demonstrating his authority. His systematic critique of her equipment and background had moved beyond normal instructor evaluation into something more personal and potentially threatening. The pattern suggested someone whose professional judgment was being compromised by psychological needs that had nothing to do with effective education or student development. The transition from equipment inspection to range orientation provided Sarah with her first opportunity to observe Thompson's instructional methods in action. His approach to safety briefings was theatrical and intimidating, designed to emphasize the dangerous nature of precision shooting, while reinforcing his position as the ultimate authority on all matters related to firearms safety and tactical applications. Precision marksmanship is an unforgiving discipline that punishes mistakes with consequences that can be permanent and irreversible, Thompson announced while demonstrating proper rifle handling techniques. "One moment of carelessness, one instance of inadequate attention to detail, and you can destroy equipment, injure yourself or others, or discover that you lack the fundamental mental discipline required for advanced shooting." Thompson's safety demonstration was technically competent, but unnecessarily complex, incorporating procedures that were more appropriate for combat operations than civilian training environments. His emphasis on military-style protocols served to intimidate participants while showcasing his supposed expertise in tactical applications that exceeded normal civilian requirements. Sarah followed the safety briefing with professional attention, noting that Thompson's procedures were largely consistent with standard military practices, but included several modifications that appeared designed more for dramatic effect than practical safety requirements. His approach suggested someone whose understanding of firearms safety was based primarily on training environments rather than operational experience, where efficiency and simplicity were often more important than elaborate protocols. The first practical exercise involved basic rifle setup and sight alignment at a 100-yard range, where participants would demonstrate their current skill level while Thompson and his staff evaluated their fundamental capabilities. Sarah approached the firing line with careful attention to Thompson's instructions, understanding that her performance during this initial exercise would determine how she was perceived and treated throughout the remainder of the program. Thompson positioned himself directly behind Sarah's firing position, where his presence would create maximum psychological pressure, while providing him with the best opportunity to critique her technique and offer unsolicited advice. His commentary began before she had even settled into her shooting position, reflecting his apparent belief that constant instruction was necessary to prevent fundamental errors. "Miss Mitchell, your rifle position is too comfortable," Thompson announced. Precision shooting requires you to maintain consistent form, even when that form is physically challenging. Adjust your stance to create more tension in your supporting muscles. Sarah made the requested adjustments without argument. Though her tactical training had taught her that Thompson's suggested position was actually less stable and more likely to result in inconsistent shot placement. His instructions seemed designed to create difficulty rather than improve performance, suggesting that his primary goal was demonstrating authority rather than providing effective education. The moment had arrived for Sarah's first shots under Thompson's direct observation, where her performance would either validate his preconceptions about her limitations or begin to reveal capabilities that might threaten his position as the program's acknowledged expert. The choice between maintaining her cover through deliberately poor performance or demonstrating enough competence to avoid complete humiliation would determine the trajectory of their relationship for the remainder of the training program. Sarah's first shooting exercise required the most sophisticated acting performance of her civilian life, as she deliberately missed shots that should have been trivial for someone with her capabilities, while avoiding failure so complete that it might raise safety concerns or questions about her basic competency. Her initial group of 5 shots at the 100-yard target produced a pattern that suggested someone struggling with fundamental marksmanship principles without appearing dangerously incompetent. Thompson's commentary during her shooting sequence was delivered with the satisfied tone of someone whose predictions about participant limitations were being confirmed exactly as expected. "Miss Mitchell, your shot placement indicates fundamental problems with breathing control, trigger management, and sight alignment," he announced loudly enough for other participants to hear. "These are basic skills that should be mastered before attempting advanced precision training." Sarah absorbed Thompson's criticism without response, understanding that any attempt to defend her performance would provide him with additional opportunities for public humiliation. Her tactical analysis of the situation indicated that Thompson's psychological campaign against her was escalating beyond normal instructor-student dynamics into something more personal and potentially dangerous to her cover story. The morning's training progression moved through increasingly complex exercises designed to separate participants into different skill categories while providing Thompson with opportunities to demonstrate his superior knowledge and teaching ability. Sarah's deliberate mediocrity in each drill was carefully calibrated to avoid attracting positive attention while staying within the acceptable range of beginner performance. During the 200-yard precision shooting exercise, Sarah's challenge was to simulate the natural inconsistency of an untrained shooter while maintaining enough accuracy to avoid elimination from the program. Her shots needed to reflect the kind of mechanical difficulties that Thompson expected from civilian participants facing challenges beyond their preparation, but without the complete breakdown that might trigger safety interventions. "Exactly as I anticipated," Thompson declared after reviewing Sarah's target through his spotting scope. "The increased distance has revealed the fundamental weaknesses in your shooting foundation. Your groups have opened up significantly, and your point of impact has shifted due to inconsistent form under pressure." Mike Stevens, shooting at the position next to Sarah, was experiencing genuine difficulty with the longer range exercises and offered quiet encouragement during the brief pause between shooting strings. "Don't let him get to you," he whispered, while adjusting his scope settings. "Guy's got serious control issues. Half the stuff he's saying is just mind games." Jessica Warren, who had been performing well in the morning exercises, observed Thompson's treatment of Sarah with growing disapproval. Her law enforcement background had taught her to recognize the difference between constructive criticism and systematic harassment, and Thompson's approach was clearly crossing professional boundaries. "Chief Thompson," Warren interjected during one of his extended critiques of Sarah's technique, "perhaps we could focus on specific technical improvements rather than general performance limitations. What specific adjustments would help Miss Mitchell improve her consistency?" Thompson's response to Warren's intervention revealed the extent to which his psychological campaign against Sarah had become his primary focus, overriding his professional responsibilities as an instructor. Detective Warren, Miss Mitchell's performance issues stem from fundamental attitude problems that interfere with proper instruction absorption. Technical adjustments are useless until she develops the mental discipline required for precision shooting. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez watched Thompson's escalating hostility with increasing concern about the personal nature of his criticism and the obvious bias affecting his professional judgment. Her attempts to moderate his approach through subtle interventions had been unsuccessful, and his behavior was beginning to create a hostile training environment that could affect all participants. The afternoon session introduced moving target engagements and timed shooting exercises that would challenge even experienced marksmen while providing Thompson with additional opportunities to demonstrate the vast gap between his expertise and the amateur capabilities of his civilian students. Sarah's performance in these advanced drills required her to simulate stress responses and technical limitations that would justify poor results without appearing deliberately sabotaged. Miss Mitchell, your performance under time pressure confirms my assessment that you lack the psychological foundation necessary for precision shooting, Thompson announced after reviewing her scores on the moving target exercise. Your inability to maintain basic accuracy when challenged by realistic scenarios indicates fundamental mental weaknesses that cannot be corrected through technical instruction alone. Thompson's evaluation was delivered with increasing hostility, focusing on character deficiencies rather than technical errors, suggesting someone whose authority felt fundamentally threatened by something he couldn't identify but somehow sensed. His systematic campaign to undermine Sarah's confidence was escalating beyond normal instructor-student relationships into psychological warfare designed to force her withdrawal from the program. The other participants had begun to notice Thompson's disproportionate focus on Sarah, with several expressing private sympathy for the unfair treatment she was receiving. But their support was limited by their own vulnerability to Thompson's authority and their lack of understanding about the true nature of the conflict that was developing. Sarah, I don't know what his problem is with you, but everyone can see. He's being completely unfair, whispered Jennifer Walsh, a software engineer from Seattle who had been struggling with her own shooting challenges. His criticism of you is way harsher than what he's giving guys who are performing worse. Similar expressions of support came from other participants who had witnessed Thompson's biased evaluation methods. But Sarah understood that their sympathy, while appreciated, couldn't alter the fundamental dynamic driving Thompson's behavior. His need to establish absolute dominance over her had evolved beyond rational instructor evaluation into a personal crusade that would only end when one of them achieved decisive victory. The second day of training introduced long-range precision shooting at 300 and 400 yards, distances that would challenge most civilian shooters while providing Thompson with opportunities to demonstrate capabilities that separated professional instructors from amateur students. Sarah's performance at these extended ranges required her most sophisticated deception yet, as she needed to simulate the natural deterioration of accuracy that affected untrained shooters, while avoiding complete failure that might compromise safety protocols. Thompson's instruction during the long-range exercises emphasized the exponential increase in difficulty that came with extended distances, wind reading, and environmental factors that exceeded most civilians' understanding. His technical demonstrations were competent and educational, but delivered with the condescending tone of someone whose superior knowledge needed to be acknowledged by students who lacked the background to appreciate his expertise. At 400 yards, Miss Mitchell, your fundamental shooting deficiencies become exponentially more problematic, Thompson explained while observing her target through high-powered optics. The technical precision required for consistent accuracy at this distance cannot be achieved through luck or casual effort. It requires capabilities that are developed through years of dedicated training under proper instruction. Sarah's shots at 400 yards were carefully placed to suggest someone overwhelmed by complexity that exceeded her preparation, while avoiding the kind of dangerous misses that might trigger safety interventions. Her grouping pattern reflected the kind of mechanical stress that Thompson expected from civilian trainees facing challenges beyond their capabilities, confirming his preconceptions about her limitations while avoiding suspicion about deliberate poor performance. The psychological pressure that Thompson maintained during these extended range exercises was designed to create stress responses that would justify failure among participants he had identified as problematic. His constant commentary, positioning directly behind shooting positions, and emphasis on the consequences of poor performance were clearly intended to disrupt concentration and create the kind of anxiety that would validate his assessments of student capabilities. Notice how Miss Mitchell's performance deteriorates significantly when real challenges are introduced, Thompson announced to the assembled group while Sarah struggled with a particularly difficult wind reading exercise. This is exactly the kind of breakdown that occurs when students attempt training that exceeds their fundamental capabilities and mental preparation. The third day brought advanced tactical shooting scenarios that Thompson described as the true test of whether participants possess the mental toughness and technical capability required for elite-level marksmanship training. Sarah recognized immediately that these exercises had been designed specifically to force her into situations where maintaining her cover would become impossible without accepting complete humiliation. Today we implement combat-realistic shooting scenarios that will definitively separate those with genuine potential from those who have been overestimating their capabilities, Thompson announced with barely concealed anticipation. These exercises require not only technical proficiency, but the psychological resilience to execute precise shots when failure has serious consequences. The tactical scenarios involved engaging multiple targets while navigating physical obstacles under strict time constraints that would challenge experienced shooters. Thompson positioned himself as the primary evaluator, his commentary providing constant pressure that appeared to be instructional guidance, but was actually designed to disrupt concentration and create stress responses that would justify failure. Among participants he had targeted for elimination, Sarah's performance in the tactical scenarios required her to demonstrate stress responses and technical limitations that would justify mediocre results, while avoiding complete breakdown that might compromise her safety qualifications. Her movement through the obstacle course needed to appear awkward and uncertain rather than fluid and efficient. Her target engagement sequences had to suggest confusion rather than tactical awareness, and her overall demeanor needed to reflect someone overwhelmed by complexity beyond her preparation. Exactly as I predicted, Thompson declared after Sarah's first tactical run. Miss Mitchell's performance under realistic pressure reveals the fundamental weaknesses that proper evaluation is designed to identify. The technical improvements she showed during basic exercises disappear completely when genuine challenges are introduced. But Sarah's careful observation during the tactical scenarios revealed crucial information about Thompson that would prove valuable if their conflict continued to escalate. His positioning during exercises was tactically unsound, favoring dramatic presentation over practical safety considerations. His attention was focused on managing his image rather than genuinely assessing participant capabilities, and his technical demonstrations emphasized theatrical effect over genuine instructional value. More significantly, Sarah noticed that Thompson's evaluation criteria were being applied inconsistently across different participants. Male trainees who performed poorly received encouragement and additional instruction, while female participants who struggled were subjected to public criticism and character assessment. The pattern suggested someone whose professional judgment was being compromised by personal biases that created exploitable vulnerabilities in his authority structure. The evening debrief sessions that Thompson conducted after each day's training became increasingly focused on Sarah's supposed limitations and character deficiencies. His analysis of her performance was delivered with the clinical precision of someone documenting evidence for predetermined conclusions rather than providing constructive feedback designed to improve student capabilities. Miss Mitchell's consistent inability to perform under challenging conditions indicates fundamental problems that extend beyond technical deficiencies into areas of character and mental preparation, Thompson announced during the group debrief. Her presence in advanced training represents exactly the kind of misallocation of resources that undermines the effectiveness of serious marksmanship programs. The other participants listened to Thompson's assessment with growing discomfort, recognizing that his criticism had moved beyond professional evaluation into personal attack territory. Several attempted to offer supportive comments about Sarah's effort and improvement, but their interventions were dismissed by Thompson as misguided sympathy that interfered with proper evaluation procedures. Sarah's private assessment of her situation during the third evening forced her to confront the reality that Thompson's campaign against her was escalating toward a confrontation that would require her to choose between revealing her capabilities or accepting humiliation so complete that it would validate every criticism he had made about her character and qualifications. The fourth day's training schedule included Thompson's announcement of a final, comprehensive evaluation that would determine which participants possessed the mental toughness and technical capability required for advanced certification. Sarah understood immediately that this evaluation had been designed specifically to force her into a position where maintaining her cover would become impossible without accepting failure, so complete that it would justify Thompson's systematic campaign against her. Tomorrow's final evaluation will consist of precision shooting under extreme pressure conditions that will expose any fundamental weaknesses in training, preparation, or psychological resilience, Thompson announced with satisfaction. This exercise will definitively separate those with genuine capabilities from those who have been overestimating their potential throughout this program. Sarah studied the evaluation requirements with growing concern, recognizing that Thompson had created conditions where her choices were limited to revealing her true capabilities or accepting failure so complete that it would destroy any possibility of completing the certification she needed for her security consulting work. The challenge involved precision shooting at distances and under conditions that would require capabilities far beyond what any genuine beginner could reasonably be expected to possess. Thompson's confidence in his tactical superiority was evident as he explained the evaluation procedures, clearly believing that he had finally created conditions that would achieve his objective of establishing absolute dominance over Sarah while demonstrating his superior expertise to all participants. His commentary was directed as much toward the assembled group as toward Sarah herself, using the evaluation as an opportunity to reinforce his authority while publicly exposing what he believed were her pretensions to capabilities beyond her actual background. The moment was approaching when Sarah Mitchell would be forced to choose between continued submission to systematic humiliation and the revelation of capabilities that would transform everyone's understanding of who she really was and what she represented. Thompson's confidence in his psychological warfare was about to collide with skills and experience that existed far beyond his comprehension. But the cost of victory might be higher than Sarah was prepared to pay for maintaining her peaceful civilian existence. The final evaluation dawned gray and windy, with gusting crosswinds that would challenge even experienced precision shooters. But Thompson seemed almost pleased by the deteriorating weather conditions. As participants gathered at the 500-yard range for the ultimate test of marksmanship capability, his predatory satisfaction was evident to everyone present. Sarah understood that the environmental challenges were not coincidental. Thompson had deliberately scheduled the final evaluation to coincide with conditions that would maximize difficulty and justify failure. Ladies and gentlemen, today's evaluation will separate the wheat from the chaff once and for all, Thompson announced, his voice carrying easily over the wind. You will engage precision targets at 500 yards in conditions that simulate real-world challenges. No accommodations, no second chances, no excuses. Either you possess the fundamental capabilities required for advanced marksmanship, or you don't. The evaluation protocol Thompson outlined was deliberately punitive, requiring each participant to engage 5 targets of decreasing size at maximum range, while being timed and subjected to psychological pressure through his constant commentary. Sarah recognized that the exercise had been designed not to assess genuine capability, but to create conditions where her failure would appear inevitable and justified to the other participants. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez approached Thompson during the final equipment check with barely concealed concern about the safety implications of conducting precision shooting in deteriorating weather conditions. Chief, the wind gusts are approaching 25 miles per hour with variable direction. These conditions are beyond what most participants can safely handle at 500 yards. Thompson's dismissal of Rodriguez's safety concerns revealed the extent to which his personal vendetta against Sarah had overridden his professional responsibilities. Colonel, these civilians signed up for elite-level training, not recreational accommodation. If they can't handle realistic environmental challenges, they need to discover that fact before they represent themselves as qualified marksmen. Sarah observed the exchange between Thompson and Rodriguez with tactical awareness, recognizing that Thompson's judgment was being compromised by his psychological investment in her humiliation. His willingness to compromise safety protocols to achieve personal objectives represented the kind of leadership failure that had ended military careers and endangered lives in combat environments. The other participants prepared for the evaluation with varying degrees of confidence and anxiety, but most seemed genuinely concerned about the challenging conditions and demanding requirements. Mike Stevens checked his equipment multiple times while muttering about the crosswinds, and Jessica Warren practiced her breathing techniques in an attempt to manage the stress that Thompson's presentation had created. "This is insane," whispered Jennifer Walsh as she struggled to adjust her scope for the extreme range. "I can barely see the targets through all this wind, and he expects us to hit them consistently. This feels more like a setup for failure than a legitimate evaluation." Sarah's equipment preparation required careful attention to maintaining her cover story while ensuring that her rifle was actually capable of accurate performance when the moment came to reveal her true capabilities. Her basic hunting rifle and factory scope were genuinely inadequate for precision shooting at 500 yards, but her knowledge of ballistics and environmental factors would allow her to compensate for equipment limitations in ways that would shock everyone present. Thompson's individual briefing with each participant before they attempted the evaluation provided him with opportunities to apply maximum psychological pressure while establishing his predictions about their likely performance. When he reached Sarah's position, his confidence in her inevitable failure was evident in his relaxed, almost casual demeanor. "Miss Mitchell, I want you to understand that this evaluation will expose the fundamental gap between your perceived capabilities and your actual qualifications," Thompson announced with satisfaction. "Your consistent poor performance throughout this program has demonstrated exactly why proper screening procedures exist to prevent unqualified individuals from wasting everyone's time." Sarah's response was measured and respectful, giving Thompson no excuse to escalate his verbal assault while maintaining the dignity that had characterized her behavior throughout his systematic campaign of humiliation. "I understand the requirements, sir. I'll do my best with the capabilities I have. Your best, Miss Mitchell, will be woefully inadequate for these conditions and requirements," Thompson replied with certainty. "But perhaps this failure will teach you some humility about your actual limitations and help you make more realistic choices about future training endeavors." The first participants to attempt the evaluation confirmed Thompson's expectations about the extreme difficulty of the exercise. Even experienced shooters struggled with the combination of distance, wind, time pressure, and psychological stress that Thompson had created. Mike Stevens managed only 2 hits out of 5 targets. Jessica Warren achieved 3 hits but with poor shot placement, and most others performed significantly worse. Thompson's commentary during each participant's attempt was delivered with the analytical precision of someone documenting evidence for predetermined conclusions. His criticism focused on fundamental character deficiencies rather than technical challenges, suggesting that poor performance reflected personal inadequacy rather than genuinely difficult conditions. Notice how the pressure reveals fundamental weaknesses that weren't apparent during basic exercises, Thompson announced to the assembled group. This is exactly why advanced evaluation is necessary to separate genuine capability from superficial improvement under controlled conditions. Sarah's turn at the firing line arrived with the inevitability of a tactical situation that had spiraled beyond any possibility of control or concealment. Thompson positioned himself directly behind her shooting position, where his presence would create maximum psychological pressure while providing him with the best vantage point to document her anticipated failure. "Miss Mitchell, this is your moment of truth," Thompson declared with barely concealed satisfaction. 5 targets, 500 yards, crosswinds, time pressure. Let's see if all that hunting experience you claimed translates into actual performance under realistic conditions. Sarah approached the firing line with deliberate calm, her mind rapidly calculating wind speed, direction changes, and the ballistic compensation required for her basic equipment. The targets were barely visible through her factory scope, and the gusting crosswinds would challenge even her exceptional abilities. But her tactical assessment of the situation had identified an opportunity to end Thompson's campaign while achieving objectives that extended beyond simple retaliation. The moment she settled into her shooting position, Sarah felt the familiar transformation that had once made her legendary among special operations forces. Her breathing settled into the controlled rhythm that optimized oxygen flow while minimizing movement. Her vision sharpened to focus exclusively on wind indicators and target characteristics. Her awareness expanded to encompass environmental factors that would affect bullet trajectory over the 500-yard distance. Thompson's commentary continued as Sarah prepared for her first shot, his voice carrying the confident tone of someone whose predictions about participant failure were about to be spectacularly confirmed. "Notice how Miss Mitchell is taking excessive time for sight alignment, indicating uncertainty about basic shooting fundamentals under pressure." Sarah's finger found the trigger with the gentle precision that had once eliminated high-value targets across multiple theaters of conflict. Her first shot broke cleanly during a momentary lull in the crosswind, the bullet traveling 500 yards to strike the center of the first target with an accuracy that shocked everyone present into complete silence. Thompson's confident commentary stopped abruptly as he processed what he had witnessed through his spotting scope. The shot placement was not just accurate, it was perfect, executed under conditions that had challenged every other participant to achieve even marginal success. His worldview began to crumble as he realized that Sarah's consistent poor performance throughout the program had been completely fraudulent. "Lucky shot," Thompson announced after a moment of stunned silence, his voice carrying the tremor of uncertainty that had been completely absent from his previous interactions. Wind conditions can create deceptive accuracy that doesn't reflect genuine capability. Sarah's second shot eliminated any possibility that her first hit had been coincidental. The bullet struck the second target dead center despite a significant change in wind direction that had occurred between shots. Her ability to read environmental conditions and adjust for ballistic factors was demonstrating capabilities that existed far beyond anything Thompson had encountered in his military career. The assembled participants watched in amazement as Sarah systematically engaged each target with precision that defied explanation given her supposed background in basic equipment. Her shooting position was rock steady despite the challenging winds. Her timing was perfect for the brief lulls between gusts, and her shot placement was achieving accuracy standards that exceeded what most of them could accomplish under ideal conditions. "That's impossible," whispered Mike Stevens as Sarah's third shot found its mark. "Nobody shoots like that with basic hunting equipment at 500 yards in these winds. She's got to be some kind of professional." Jessica Warren observed Sarah's performance with the analytical eye of someone whose law enforcement background had exposed her to various levels of shooting expertise. "This isn't beginner's luck or good equipment. This is world-class marksmanship ability. She's been playing us all from the beginning." Thompson's psychological preparation for Sarah's inevitable failure was replaced by growing panic as he recognized that his systematic campaign had been directed against someone whose actual capabilities exceeded his own expertise and experience. His confidence in his tactical superiority was evaporating as he witnessed shooting skills that challenged his understanding of what was possible under such difficult conditions. Sarah's fourth shot struck the smallest target with precision that eliminated any remaining doubt about her true qualifications. The mathematical probability of achieving such accuracy under these conditions with basic equipment was essentially zero unless the shooter possessed training and experience that existed at the highest levels of military specialization. "Who are you?" Thompson demanded, his voice carrying none of the authority that had characterized his interactions throughout the program. That level of precision shooting is not achievable without extensive professional training and combat experience. Sarah's response to Thompson's question was delivered with the calm authority that had once coordinated complex military operations across hostile territory. "I'm exactly who I said I was, Chief Thompson. Someone who came here to learn and improve my shooting skills." The final shot of Sarah's evaluation was executed with deliberate theatrical precision, designed to leave no doubt about the vast gap between her actual capabilities and the amateur status she had maintained throughout Thompson's systematic campaign of humiliation. The bullet struck the center of the most challenging target, completing a perfect score under conditions that had defeated every other participant. The silence that followed Sarah's demonstration was broken only by the wind and the distant sounds of other training activities at the facility. 24 pairs of eyes remained fixed on her with expressions ranging from amazement to suspicion, while Thompson struggled to process the implications of what he had witnessed for his authority and credibility. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez approached the firing line with professional bearing that couldn't disguise her shock at Sarah's performance. "Miss Mitchell, that was the most impressive display of marksmanship I've witnessed in 15 years of firearms instruction. Your capabilities obviously extend far beyond the background information you provided during registration." Sarah's mind raced through the limited options available to her, each potential response carrying consequences that would reshape not only her immediate situation but her entire, carefully constructed civilian existence. Complete honesty would end her anonymity forever, while potentially revealing classified information that could compromise national security. Continued deception was no longer possible given the evidence of her capabilities that every person present had witnessed. "I may have understated my previous experience somewhat," Sarah replied with careful precision. "My background includes more extensive training than I initially indicated." Thompson's aggressive posture had shifted as he processed Sarah's revelation, recognizing that his systematic campaign had been directed against someone whose actual qualifications probably exceeded his own background and expertise. His psychological need to maintain dominance was colliding with growing awareness that his authority and credibility had been fundamentally undermined by his misjudgment of her capabilities. "What kind of extensive training?" Thompson's question carried the edge of someone whose worldview was being threatened by revelations that challenged everything he had believed about his own expertise and authority. Precision shooting at that level requires advanced military training that's limited to elite special operations units. Sarah's decision about how much truth to reveal was complicated by the presence of civilian participants whose backgrounds didn't authorize them to receive information about classified military operations. But her demonstration had created a situation where some explanation was required to prevent speculation that might be more dangerous than controlled disclosure. The moment had arrived when Sarah Mitchell would be forced to choose between complete exposure of her classified background and partial revelation that might satisfy curiosity while preserving the essential elements of her cover story. Thompson's confidence in his psychological warfare had been shattered by capabilities that exceeded his comprehension, but the consequences of her victory were about to extend far beyond the immediate training environment. The transformation in the atmosphere at Blackwater Training Facility was immediate and profound. Sarah's impossible demonstration had shattered not only Thompson's carefully constructed authority, but the fundamental assumptions that every person present had made about her identity and capabilities. The quiet librarian from Cedar Falls had revealed herself to be something far more dangerous and mysterious than anyone could have imagined. Thompson stood frozen behind the spotting scope, his face cycling through expressions of disbelief, rage, and dawning comprehension as he processed the implications of what he had witnessed. His entire professional identity was built on being the facility's acknowledged expert, the former Marine whose superior knowledge and experience justified his dominance over civilian trainees. Sarah's perfect shooting had exposed him as fundamentally inadequate in the presence of genuine expertise. "Impossible," Thompson muttered, his voice barely audible over the wind. "Nobody achieves that level of precision with basic equipment under these conditions. The ballistic calculations alone would require computer assistance and professional-grade optics." Sarah remained in her shooting position, rifle still trained downrange, as she calculated the rapidly changing dynamics of her situation. Her demonstration had eliminated any possibility of maintaining her cover story, but it had also created tactical advantages that might allow her to control the narrative and protect the classified information that her real background contained. "Lieutenant." Colonel Rodriguez moved to the spotting scope to confirm Sarah's target results, her military experience providing the technical knowledge necessary to understand exactly what she had witnessed. 5 perfect center shots at 500 yards and variable crosswinds using hunting-grade equipment, she announced to the assembled group. "This represents shooting capability that exists at the absolute pinnacle of military precision marksmanship." The other participants began to emerge from their stunned silence, their conversations revealing the extent to which Sarah's revelation had challenged their understanding of everything they thought they knew about her background and qualifications. "She's been playing us all week," said Mike Stevens, his voice carrying admiration rather than resentment. "Watching Thompson tear her apart while knowing she could outshoot everyone here, including the instructors, that takes serious mental discipline." "Jessica." Warren approached Sarah's position with the professional curiosity of someone whose law enforcement background had taught her to recognize exceptional capabilities when she encountered them. "Miss Mitchell, or whoever you really are, that demonstration just redefined my understanding of what's possible in precision shooting. Your background obviously includes training that most people never receive." Jennifer Walsh stared at the distant targets through her binoculars, still struggling to accept what she had witnessed. "I can barely see those targets from here," and she put 5 bullets through the exact center of each one, in this wind. "With that basic rifle, it's like watching someone perform magic." Thompson's psychological recovery from Sarah's demonstration was hampered by his inability to process information that fundamentally contradicted his worldview and professional identity. His military career had been built on the assumption that his expertise was superior to civilian capabilities, But Sarah's shooting had revealed skills that exceeded anything in his experience or training. "You deliberately misrepresented your background on registration forms," Thompson accused, his voice carrying the defensive anger of someone whose authority had been completely undermined. "Military personnel are required to disclose previous training that's relevant to program participation." Sarah's response was delivered with the calm precision that had once characterized her briefings in classified operational environments. "I provided accurate information about my desire to participate in basic civilian training rather than demonstrate capabilities that I hoped to leave in the past." The distinction was important for reasons that extended beyond Thompson's wounded ego. Sarah's service record contained information that was classified at levels requiring congressional authorization to access. And her demonstration had created a situation where revealing too much truth might compromise national security, while revealing too little would fail to satisfy the curiosity that her shooting had generated. Rodriguez stepped between Thompson and Sarah with the diplomatic authority of someone whose military rank and experience provided protection against Thompson's increasingly erratic behavior. "Chief, I think we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with before we make accusations about misrepresentation or protocol violations." The tactical situation was complicated by the presence of civilian participants whose security clearances didn't authorize them to receive information about classified military operations, but whose witness to Sarah's capabilities created obligations for explanation that couldn't be satisfied through normal disclosure procedures. "Ma'am," Rodriguez addressed Sarah with the respectful tone that military personnel used when dealing with individuals whose actual rank or classification was uncertain. "Your demonstration today indicates training and experience that exceeds normal civilian qualifications. Would you be willing to provide additional information about your background for our official records?" Sarah's decision about how much truth to reveal required balancing multiple competing objectives, satisfying legitimate curiosity without compromising classified information, maintaining some vestige of her civilian privacy while acknowledging her military background, and controlling the narrative before speculation created more dangerous misconceptions about her identity and capabilities. "I served in the Army for 8 years in roles that required specialized training in precision marksmanship," Sarah replied with the diplomatic language that veterans learn to use when discussing classified service with unauthorized personnel. "My registration forms accurately reflected my desire to participate in basic civilian training rather than demonstrate capabilities that were developed for different purposes." Thompson's reaction to Sarah's carefully worded explanation revealed the extent to which his ego was driving his response rather than professional curiosity or legitimate security concerns. "Specialized training in precision marksmanship? You're talking about sniper school, aren't you? Advanced military marksmanship training that's limited to elite units with classified missions." The question was delivered with the aggressive intensity of someone whose psychological need to understand and categorize Sarah's capabilities was overriding his judgment about appropriate inquiry procedures. But his speculation was approaching areas that Sarah couldn't discuss without violating security protocols that remained binding despite her civilian status. Rodriguez recognized the dangerous direction that Thompson's questioning was taking and intervened with military authority that superseded his position as facility commander. "Chief, questions about classified military training require proper security clearances and need-to-know authorization. We should focus on facility management rather than operational background." But Thompson's psychological breakdown was accelerating as he struggled to reconcile Sarah's demonstration with his own professional identity and expertise. His systematic campaign to humiliate her had been based on the assumption that his military background provided superior knowledge and authority. But her revelation had exposed him as fundamentally inadequate in the presence of genuine combat experience. 8 years of specialized marksmanship training, Thompson repeated, his voice carrying the edge of someone whose worldview was crumbling. Combat deployments? Special operations? How many confirmed kills do you have, Miss Mitchell? The question crossed professional boundaries and violated military protocol in ways that revealed Thompson's complete loss of judgment and emotional control. Sarah's actual service record contained information that could never be discussed in civilian environments, but Thompson's aggressive inquiry was creating a situation where her refusal to answer might generate more dangerous speculation than controlled disclosure. My military service included assignments that I'm not authorized to discuss in detail. Sarah responded with the measured tone that intelligence professionals used when deflecting unauthorized inquiries. The capabilities you witness today reflect training that was necessary for mission success in challenging environments. The assembled participants listened to this exchange with growing awareness that they were witnessing something far more significant than a simple revelation about hidden shooting skills. Sarah's careful language and Thompson's increasingly desperate questions suggested a military background that extended into areas of special operations and classified activities that most civilians never encountered. Mike Stevens approached the group with professional bearing that reflected his own military service and understanding of security protocols. Ma'am, speaking as someone who served in Iraq, I want you to know that we all respect whatever service you provide for our country. What you demonstrated today was extraordinary, and we're honored to have witnessed it. Similar expressions of respect came from other participants who recognized that Sarah's revelation represented something far more significant than exceptional marksmanship skills. Her careful responses to Thompson's questions, combined with her impossible shooting demonstration, suggested military service that had involved the highest levels of operational classification and national importance. Jessica Warren observed the proceedings with the analytical awareness that her law enforcement background had developed for recognizing situations that exceeded normal civilian authority and jurisdiction. This feels like something that should be handled by people with proper security clearances rather than civilian training instructors, she commented quietly to the group. Thompson's inability to accept his fundamental misjudgment of Sarah's capabilities was driving him toward increasingly erratic behavior that threatened to compromise facility operations and student safety. His psychological investment in maintaining dominance over her had been so complete that her revelation represented not just professional embarrassment, but personal devastation. You made me look like a fool, Thompson accused, his voice carrying the desperate anger of someone whose entire identity had been challenged. Sitting there pretending to be some amateur while possessing capabilities that exceed professional instructor qualifications. You deliberately sabotaged my training program. Sarah's response revealed the extent to which her military background had prepared her for dealing with individuals whose judgment was compromised by emotional instability and wounded ego. Chief Thompson, I participated in your program exactly as advertised. My performance and basic exercises reflected my desire to learn rather than demonstrate capabilities that weren't relevant to civilian training objectives. The distinction was tactically important because it established that Sarah's deception had been defensive rather than aggressive, designed to protect her privacy rather than undermine Thompson's authority. But his psychological state was preventing him from recognizing the difference between legitimate self-protection and deliberate humiliation. Rodriguez's intervention became more forceful as she recognized that Thompson's behavior was escalating toward confrontation that could compromise facility safety and create liability issues for the training program. Chief, I recommend we suspend today's activities and conduct a proper debrief in the administrative office where we can address these issues through appropriate channels. But Thompson's psychological breakdown was accelerating beyond the reach of normal military discipline and professional protocol. His entire worldview had been built on assumptions about his own expertise and authority that Sarah's demonstration had completely destroyed, leaving him without the cognitive framework necessary to process what he had witnessed. "Suspend activities. Are you insane?" Thompson demanded, his voice rising to levels that attracted attention from other training areas. "This woman has been conducting psychological warfare against me all week, deliberately making me look incompetent while hiding capabilities that make my own background look amateur." The accuracy of Thompson's assessment was precisely what made it so psychologically devastating. Sarah's shooting had indeed revealed his limitations in ways that could never be undone or forgotten by anyone who had witnessed her demonstration. His authority and credibility were permanently compromised, but his emotional state was preventing him from accepting that reality. Sarah recognized that Thompson's psychological collapse was creating dangers that extended beyond her immediate situation into areas that could affect facility safety and operational security. His erratic behavior was attracting attention from other staff members and students, creating a situation where her revelation might become more widely known than she could safely manage. "Chief Thompson," Sarah addressed him with the calm authority that had once managed crisis situations in combat environments, "I recommend we move this discussion to a private setting where we can address your concerns without compromising facility operations or student safety." But Thompson's response revealed that his emotional state had deteriorated beyond the reach of reason or professional consideration. His systematic campaign against Sarah had been so central to his psychological well-being that her revelation represented not just professional failure, but personal annihilation. "Private setting? So you can continue your psychological manipulation without witnesses?" Thompson's paranoia was becoming evident to everyone present. "You've been playing mind games all week, and now you want to finish destroying my credibility in private where nobody can document what really happened." The situation was rapidly approaching a crisis point where Thompson's emotional instability might create dangers that Sarah couldn't control through normal diplomatic means. Her tactical assessment indicated that his psychological breakdown was accelerating toward confrontation that might require more direct intervention to protect facility safety and operational security. Rodriguez's attempts to restore order were being undermined by Thompson's complete loss of professional judgment and emotional control. Her authority as second-in-command was insufficient to override Thompson's position as facility commander, but his behavior was clearly exceeding the boundaries of acceptable leadership conduct. The moment had arrived when Sarah Mitchell would be forced to choose between allowing Thompson's psychological breakdown to continue unchecked and taking more direct action to protect the safety and security of everyone present. Her revelation had created consequences that extended far beyond simple exposure of her marksmanship capabilities into areas where her special operations background might be required to manage dangers that civilian authority couldn't address. Thompson's psychological deterioration reached a critical threshold when he began reaching for his sidearm while making increasingly incoherent accusations about Sarah's supposed psychological warfare campaign. The moment his hand moved toward his weapon, Sarah's special operations training activated with the lightning reflexes that had once saved her life in hostile territory across 3 continents. "Chief, step away from your weapon," Sarah commanded, with the unmistakable authority of someone whose voice had once coordinated life and death operations under enemy fire. Her transformation from mild-mannered librarian to tactical operator was instantaneous and complete, shocking the assembled participants into stunned silence. Thompson's hand froze halfway to his holster as he processed the complete change in Sarah's demeanor and bearing. The quiet woman who had endured his systematic humiliation for 5 days had vanished, replaced by someone whose presence radiated the kind of lethal competence that made experienced soldiers nervous. His military training, however limited, was sufficient to recognize genuine authority when he encountered it. "You don't give me orders," Thompson replied, but his voice lacked conviction and his hand remained motionless. Some instinctive part of his mind understood that he was no longer dealing with a civilian trainee, but with someone whose background included situations where armed confrontation was a routine occupational hazard. Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez moved to support Sarah's intervention with professional authority that reflected her own combat experience and tactical training. Chief Thompson, you're relieved of command pending psychological evaluation. Stand down immediately and report to the administrative office. The combination of Sarah's tactical presence and Rodriguez's military authority created a dynamic that penetrated Thompson's psychological breakdown and activated his ingrained responses to legitimate command structure. His hand moved away from his weapon as 28 years of military conditioning overrode his emotional instability. "This isn't over," Thompson muttered as he backed away from the confrontation, his voice carrying the defeated tone of someone whose entire worldview had been systematically destroyed. "You think you've won, but there will be consequences for what you've done here." Sarah maintained her tactical alertness until Thompson had moved beyond weapon range, and Rodriguez had established control over the situation. Her special operations background had taught her that psychologically unstable individuals with military training represented unpredictable threats that required constant vigilance until they were properly contained. The assembled participants observed this final confrontation with expressions of awe and concern, recognizing that they had witnessed something far more significant than advanced marksmanship training. Sarah's instantaneous transformation into a tactical operator had revealed capabilities that extended far beyond precision shooting into areas of special operations and combat leadership that few civilians ever encountered. "Ma'am," Mike Stevens addressed Sarah with the respectful tone that military personnel used when dealing with someone whose actual rank and qualifications were uncertain but obviously substantial. "Thank you for maintaining safety and preventing what could have been a very dangerous situation." Similar expressions of gratitude came from other participants, who understood that Sarah's intervention had potentially prevented Thompson's psychological breakdown from escalating into violence that could have endangered everyone present. Her tactical awareness and crisis management skills had protected the group while maintaining professional restraint that prevented unnecessary escalation. That Rodriguez approached Sarah with the diplomatic bearing of someone whose military experience provided sufficient background to recognize exceptional qualifications when she encountered them. "Miss Mitchell, your intervention was textbook crisis management. Your background obviously includes training in tactical leadership and emergency response that exceeds normal military qualifications." Sarah's response required balancing acknowledgement of her capabilities with continued protection of classified information that couldn't be discussed in civilian environments. "My military service included assignments that required crisis management skills, Colonel Rodriguez. Today's situation fell within the parameters I was trained to handle." The carefully worded explanation provided sufficient context for Rodriguez's understanding, while avoiding specific references to special operations units or classified missions that remained protected by security protocols. But Sarah's demonstration of tactical leadership had created new challenges for maintaining her civilian anonymity and protecting operational security. Jessica Warren approached the group with professional curiosity about the legal and administrative implications of Thompson's breakdown and removal from command. "What happens now?" Thompson was the facility commander, and his behavior today probably violated multiple regulations and safety protocols. Rodriguez's response revealed her intention to implement proper military procedures for dealing with command structure failures and psychological instability among leadership personnel. Chief Thompson will undergo mandatory psychological evaluation and fitness for duty assessment. Facility operations will continue under interim command until permanent leadership changes can be implemented. The administrative aftermath of Thompson's removal created opportunities for Sarah to exit the situation before additional scrutiny could compromise her civilian privacy or reveal information about her classified background. But her demonstration had also created obligations to ensure that facility operations could continue safely and effectively. Colonel Rodriguez, Sarah addressed her with professional respect. I'd like to complete my certification requirements and conclude my participation in the program. My objectives here have been accomplished, and I need to return to my civilian responsibilities. Rodriguez's response indicated her desire to maintain contact with someone whose capabilities might prove valuable for future training programs and facility operations. Miss Mitchell, given your obvious qualifications and expertise, I'd like to discuss the possibility of your participation in our instructor development program. Your skills could be invaluable for advanced training curricula. The offer represented exactly the kind of recognition and professional involvement that Sarah had spent 3 years trying to avoid. Her transition to civilian life had been motivated by the desire to escape the world of tactical operations and military responsibilities. But her demonstration had inevitably attracted attention from people who understood the value of her capabilities. I appreciate the offer, Colonel, but my current situation doesn't allow for extended military involvement, Sarah replied with diplomatic honesty. My participation this week was intended to meet specific civilian objectives rather than resume military activities. The distinction was important for maintaining boundaries between her classified background and civilian existence. But Sarah understood that her revelation had made complete anonymity impossible. People who had witnessed her capabilities would remember her performance and potentially seek additional contact or involvement. Jennifer Walsh approached Sarah with gratitude and curiosity about her background and future plans. Sarah, what you did this week was incredible. Not just the shooting, but the way you handled Thompson's harassment and then prevented a dangerous situation. Are you really going back to civilian life after demonstrating those kinds of capabilities? The question reflected the natural assumption that someone with Sarah's evident qualifications would seek opportunities to utilize and develop those capabilities rather than returning to mundane civilian employment. But Sarah's decision to leave military service had been motivated by experiences that made ordinary life more appealing than professional recognition or tactical challenges. My civilian life is exactly what I wanted when I left military service, Sarah explained with quiet conviction. Today's demonstration was necessary to protect everyone's safety, but it doesn't change my commitment to the peaceful existence I've built over the past 3 years. Mike Stevens offered his perspective as someone whose own military service had taught him to appreciate the sacrifices made by personnel whose service involved classified operations and extended deployments. Ma'am, speaking for all of us, we're grateful for your service and honored to have witnessed your capabilities. Whatever you accomplished during your military career, you earned the right to choose your own path afterward. The recognition and respect from fellow participants provided validation that Sarah's transition to civilian life had been legitimate and well-deserved rather than an abandonment of military responsibilities. But her demonstration had also created new challenges for maintaining the anonymity that her peaceful existence required. Rodriguez's final administrative requirements involved documenting the incidents involving Thompson's breakdown and Sarah's intervention, creating official records that would be reviewed by military personnel responsible for facility operations and instructor qualifications. Sarah's cooperation with these procedures was necessary but potentially problematic for maintaining operational security. Miss Mitchell, I'll need to include your background information in my incident report, but I'll limit details to what's necessary for administrative purposes, Rodriguez assured her with professional understanding. Your privacy and security considerations will be protected within appropriate limits. The compromise represented the best possible outcome given the circumstances, but Sarah understood that any official documentation would create permanent records of her identity and location that might be accessible to intelligence agencies, or military personnel, responsible for monitoring former special operations personnel. As the group prepared to depart Blackwater Training Facility, Sarah's tactical assessment of her situation revealed both positive and negative consequences of her revelation. Thompson's threat to her psychological well-being had been eliminated, but her anonymity had been compromised in ways that might attract unwanted attention from agencies or individuals whose interests extended beyond civilian training. The drive back to Cedar Falls provided Sarah with time to process the implications of her demonstration and plan adjustments to her civilian existence that might be necessary to maintain privacy and security. Her revelation had been successful in protecting herself and others from Thompson's instability, but it had also ended the complete anonymity that had characterized her transition to civilian life. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, Sarah's therapist, would need to be informed about the weekend's events and their potential impact on Sarah's psychological well-being and civilian integration. The controlled revelation of her capabilities had been therapeutic in some ways, but it had also created new stresses and security concerns that required professional attention. Sarah's work at the Cedar Falls Public Library would continue as before, but her colleagues and patrons would never need to know about her weekend demonstration or the capabilities it had revealed. Her ordinary daily routine remained the foundation of her civilian identity, providing stability and purpose that transcended her military background. The security consulting certification that Sarah had sought through the training program was no longer necessary given the recognition she had received from Rodriguez and other qualified personnel. Her demonstrated capabilities provided credentials that exceeded any civilian certification requirements, though using those credentials might compromise the privacy she valued. As Sarah pulled into her apartment parking space behind the old bookstore on Main Street, she reflected on the permanent changes that 5 days at Blackwater had created in her carefully constructed civilian existence. Her peaceful anonymity was gone, replaced by the knowledge that people now understood her true capabilities and background. But she had also proved to herself that she could reveal those capabilities when necessary without losing her commitment to civilian life. Mrs. Patterson was waiting on the porch with fresh cookies and curiosity about Sarah's weekend training experience, representing the ordinary human connections that made civilian life meaningful despite its lack of tactical challenges or professional recognition. "How was your shooting course, dear? Did you learn what you needed to know?" "Yes, Mrs. Patterson," Sarah replied with quiet satisfaction. "I learned exactly what I needed to know." The response was true in ways that her elderly neighbor couldn't imagine, but it also represented Sarah's commitment to maintaining the peaceful existence she had chosen over the recognition and opportunities that her capabilities might have provided. The warrior who had once operated in the deepest shadows of classified operations had successfully defended her right to live as an ordinary citizen. But the demonstration that achieved that victory had also revealed that some capabilities never truly disappear. They simply wait for the right moment to remind everyone what real strength looks like. Sarah Mitchell had learned that she could reveal her extraordinary background when necessary while choosing to embrace the ordinary life she had built for herself, proving that the strongest choice is sometimes the decision to remain quiet until the moment comes to speak with actions that change everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.